Welcome back. It's another episode of Unqualified Opinions. I'm Ryan Selkis at 2-Bit Idiot.
Ryan Selkis, the self-proclaimed 2-Bit Idiot, has actually done something rather smart. He sat down and interviewed this guy, Daniel Vogel, who he's apparently known for several years from working in the industry, and they had a really, really great conversation. Now, Ryan has really kind of changed his tune on Ripple and XRP, and it's really apparent in this interview. He tries to couch it as, well, my objection has been their marketing is really kind of doesn't match up with reality, but that's half true. And I agree with those points. I've been very critical of some of their marketing as well in the past. But really, those of you that don't know, or none of you guys don't know this, but I almost did a Lazy Chico style video on this right here. This was Laura Shen's Unchanged podcast where
When I realized they were willing to participate, I requested Brad. They said Brad had an insane schedule. However, I would like to note here that Brad has appeared on at least one podcast with a fraction of my listenership.
I'm important. I should get Brad. And if I can't have Brad, I won't have anybody. So she had these two guys on. Ryan was one of them. And I mean, it's been a year since I've listened to it. This was a couple years ago. But it was like the level of, Ripple can block transactions. They can freeze XRP. The kind of stuff where you hear someone say and you're like, okay, these people have no idea what they're talking about. That really basic nonsense FUD. And he was a purveyor of that in the past. But it seems like now that his buddy Daniel here is actually using XRP and proving that he's wrong, he's starting to come around like a lot of other Bitcoin maximalists are here lately. So I've cut this interview as well as some other clips to give you guys an idea of the impact that ODL is going to have on the industry. So for those of you that don't know, Bitso is the preferred liquidity provider. From the sound of this interview, it's going to be for all of LATAM, Latin America, everything south of the U.S. border. And they are the key exchange. They're the largest exchange in Mexico. 6 weeks ago, XRP volume flipped Bitcoin's volume and is staying there. And it's because of on-demand liquidity payments flowing through their exchange. They're about to expand. We'll get into all of that. But this is a really, really key piece of Ripple's strategy, as you'll see. So let's jump in.
Talking about one of my favorite subjects, XRP. But a spoiler alert for the fans that are playing along, this is actually going to be, I think, a relatively bullish and positive discussion on XRP.
I guess if you can't beat them, join them, eh, Ryan?
The Bitso team is generally leveraging the XRP ledger and that remittance system as designed, not necessarily as a speculative store of value, but certainly going to go into the inner workings of how that relationship has been panning out.
So he takes a dig at speculators like me, but of course, what have we been saying for 2 years now? That this is how XRP will be used. This is why XRP is different, because it has real world utility, because it solves a real world problem.
So our founders started the business truly believing that crypto and digital assets have the power to transform the region. And that has been the vision for the past 5 years.
The reason why we've gone out with ODL is having the ability to connect to more destinations, more currencies, something that we've been missing in the past, where it was sort of an isolated solution we had with the limited reach.
Well, so using RippleNet as a tool to pay people, our recipients have no idea, right? To them it's agnostic who we use, as long as we can provide the lowest cost and the fastest solution.
We are a bank that is only focused in Peru. We're not planning to expand, but we think that we can expand through our service through expanding to other regions with our transactions and the quality of our services, and that way to serve Peru. And we think, as a whole, that taking a chance into different technologies, working with different companies, and working with liquidity in this year, is going to give us the extra jump to be even more competitive and to keep that edge that we have right now.
Bitso started 5 years ago with the idea that crypto could be a solution that could actually turn Latin America into the integrated financial markets.
The first thing we added in Bitso was a way to trade Bitcoin with Mexican pesos. We've invested over the years a significant amount of time at Bitso in trying to figure out cross-border transactions.
And the amount of remittances that are going through Bitso has been increasing exponentially. Bitso just announced, I think over the last week or so, 2.5% of remittances to Mexico are now going through Bitso.
Really?
Yeah.
And those are all across crypto rails?
Yes.
Wow. And I mean, it's fascinating to me because there's a lot of things that go into that, right? That 2.5% number is impressive just in general, but that means that, one, people who are sending the money got to figure this out. Two, they got to understand the value proposition. Three, they got to sign up, right, and be able to use it. And then four is the person on the receiving end's got to figure out how to use it as well.
Yeah,
a lot of steps.
It is a lot of steps, but most of those steps actually aren't happening.
Okay.
Because it's being abstracted away from the end user.
How?
Because the end user doesn't know that they're getting crypto.
We've built experiments and trials, and we actually have a working product that works on top of Bitcoin that has worked for the last 2 years, but we never really had like a lot of growth and a lot of traction.
See, Pomp and the other Bitcoin maximalists like him have their Bitcoin blinders on. They think that the average consumer is going to wake up and say, well, it is Tuesday. I think I'll abandon the traditional banking system, move everything into Bitcoin, and then figure out how to pay all my bills. And that's just simply not going to happen. It's been 10 years and crypto adoption is still what, under 2%? I mean, let's get real here. Ripple has been smart enough to know that if we want to have a large scale impact, put a dent in the universe as they describe it, then they have to interface with the traditional banking system. And as you've heard a couple times now, there are customers who are using crypto and they don't even know that they're using it. Why? Because it plugs into the back end and it creates a better experience. It lowers costs. It makes for a seamless transition. And as you heard Daniel say, they've had a Bitcoin solution for a couple years, but it didn't get any traction. Why? Because it expects consumers to change their behavior, whereas Ripple comes along and as far as the consumer is concerned, hey, this used to cost $20. Now it costs $2. And instead of 3 days, my money gets there inside of a couple minutes. This is amazing.
The region has a lot of particularities that differ from the US and Europe that were not as developed as those regions are.
It's hard to build a business on speculation in the US, but it becomes even harder to build a business based purely on speculation in regions of the world where you don't actually have a lot of money going around.
For example, if we talk especially about Mexico, you have 40% of the population is banked. So you're talking about out of 125 million people, only 40% has access to the banking system. And out of that 40%, a lot of those people are actually underbanked. So the opportunity to actually bring solutions to them that could change the way how they interact with the system is enormous.
And one of the things that we're doing sort of on the side is how can we accelerate access to folks that live in other jurisdictions in LATAM where we don't necessarily need to deploy a full solution like we have in Mexico and Argentina, where it's basically a full on-ramp and full off-ramp, very well connected to the financial realities of those folks with very strong banking integrations. In Mexico, we have access to a real-time gross settlement payment provider that allows us to basically go to and from a bank account in seconds.
So we plug into as many platforms as we can. So we're like, great, let's give RippleNet a shot. And once we plug in, we route the transaction to whatever's the most effective. That has evolved to just about everyone in one of our highest growth corridors has been RippleNet. We
actually can make payments to third parties. So someone who receives payment in crypto, for example, a freelancer that receives a payment in crypto on their Bitso account and turns it into pesos, can basically then use that to pay the rent. They can use that to pay their internet, pay that utilities, pay a friend.
It's earth-shattering, and it's just a competitive advantage that makes every day payday for my people, and that's the delta between winners and losers in my business.
especially for countries that for some time has been developing and now they're moving forward, like Peru. It's not about changing the industry. It's not about destroying banks or banking as a whole, because these institutions have come through many years and they're part of our culture, but we just want to improve them. And I think it's a very exciting time.
It's been a very big focus for us, especially in the last year and a half, is how do we actually build a business that is not completely susceptible to these huge crypto weather, right? Where basically when crypto is doing really, really well, you're doing really, really well, but if crypto is doing bad in terms of price, you're doing really poorly.
Not only Bitso is a partner to Ripple in providing this liquidity to ODL and actually building the corridor, US, Mexico, and soon Latin America as we expand.
A team in Brazil that is actively looking into Brazil. It's an interesting jurisdiction because it's a very, very large market. It's the largest economy in Latin America. We just launched a beta in Argentina, which should become a full-blown experience starting next month.
We used to dream about doing cross-border payments or remittances, and this used to be only a vision, as Brad said earlier today, and we're starting to see that really happening.
Especially in the last 7 months, as exchanges worldwide were losing volume, or many exchanges worldwide were losing volume, we were actually increasing our volume. For us, this is very important because it goes back to crypto as a utility. It goes back to a business model where you don't necessarily need to depend on crypto prices increasing in order for your business to do very well. We built the product alongside with Ripple, and we're seeing a significant amount of traction. And we believe that this is just the beginning of something.
The pre-funding side, or using XRP as the funding vehicle for that payment. So it massively improves our operational costs in using ODL, have the speed, but don't really needing to pre-fund all these various accounts across the globe. Our customers, even this morning after all the announcement and everything, is kind of how many ODL currency and destinations are open, what are the next ones, and they can't wait. That these are consumers, these are business. We have other third-party, banks or payment gateways. It's kind of look, yes, we want this solution. Let's open up more ODL destinations as soon as possible, because that's really going to be the difference for us.
So if you were paying attention to those last few clips, you noticed there was a common theme there. There is a modern day digital gold rush underway right now, happening all over the world. The Peruvian bank, they're not looking to expand their physical presence, but they do want to take their digital services to other regions. You had the payment processors wanting to go, hey man, turn this on, get these new corridors up. It's making such a huge difference for their customers that their customers are beating down the door saying, win this corridor, win this corridor. I think they're going to end up decentralizing HR functions for global corporations, at least the payments portion of it in a lot of cases. You have Bitso. What are they doing? They're looking to expand to other regions in Latin America. And they're looking to add payment services so that they can be one of the new banks that emerges from this transformation. They see this digital gold lying around everywhere. It's all up for grabs. And the ones who are putting value away in their vault are the people who are using XRP to do it.
Yeah, where we are is at the end of the beginning. We can put a man on the moon, we can find water on Mars, but I can't send a wire on Sunday.
I can very proudly say that I was testing the product since last year, from the beginning, and trying to figure out how that could solve my necessities as a treasury manager. Me as a head of finance, I handle a lot of funds that are probably on a U.S. bank and that I need to transfer into Mexico, and my options are very scarce. Usually, they take a while, they're very costly, they're not efficient. From a working capital perspective, is a very complicated transaction, and using ODL for me as a customer has been game changer.
And remember, I'm not only the Hair Club president, but I'm also a client.
nobody's telling me these stories. Like, I've done that myself, and I've been benefited from it. You see the two screens, and you see how money travels so fast, and then within the minute, you have the money that you want to transfer, that you were used to transferring in a week-long process, and now it costs you cents on the dollar, and it's so immediate.
But we think the ODL is gonna take over very fast, for sure.
Like, we want to see the network effects coming into place, especially in the region, as we start connecting different countries. Like, as Josie mentioned before, it's a matter of inclusion, and we operate in a region that has been secluded for many years from this inclusion. And as we expand to new countries, trying to see those network effects coming into place, as more industry players come and try and test this product, they validate the system and they validate the technology. So we can actually start connecting new corridors, because it's not only from the US onto every one of these countries, but the countries themselves have such a demand for this cross-border payments that if you start building a network amongst the region itself, I think it's going to be a huge win for everybody, but especially for the people who have been secluded from being connected for so many years and ignored.
In the last video, we talked about how CBDCs could be traded between larger economies in order and kind of eliminate the role of Ripple and XRP in order to, send value back and forth, but that it wouldn't work in the smaller economies. And after thinking about this for a couple of days, it dawned on me how much of the, you have this handful of currencies making up 80% of the transfers going around the world. How much of that is the smaller economies being rolled into those handful of larger currencies? I would bet it's a good chunk of it, maybe 20% or something. So as this rolls out and this liquidity problem is solved, because they don't want to, a company in Central America doesn't want to have to hop through the US dollar, the Mexican peso and then the US dollar to get their money wherever they need it to go in the world. That's added cost, added risk, added volatility, all these things. Once they don't have to do that, I think we're going to see kind of a balancing of the scales a little bit to where those larger currencies lose some of their utility because now these smaller guys have access to global liquidity. So that kind of wraps up the first segment. Now we're going to go into some of the history of what Bitso was doing behind the scenes with Ripple. And Daniel really says some revealing things that I find very interesting. I think a lot of you will as well. Some of you may want to drop off here. That's up to you. But we're going to jump in and talk about kind of how their relationship evolved over the years. And then we've got a few more things after that at the end.
We were a Ripple gateway at in the very beginning of Bitso, and we had Bitso MXN in the Ripple ledger as an asset, and we had Bitso BTC as a ledger, as an asset on the ledger. And then at some point we decided to close that because it was difficult to maintain for us, and we basically saw no customer traction whatsoever.
Okay, so a gateway is an issuance, basically. So again, on the XRP ledger, if I want to hold ounces of gold and issue digital gold tokens so that people who want to trust that I'm going to hold that gold for them so that they can trade it digitally, I can do that, or anybody that wants to can do that. And that's where Bitso initially started. But as you can see, it didn't work out because there was no community around it. It was an idea that was ahead of its time. And I think kind of Ripple's gone about this ass backwards in a lot of ways. So, initially they went to the banks and said, hey, you guys buy XRP and then use it to facilitate payments. It'll be great. And they're like, no, that's a stupid idea. Get out of here. They came back and said, okay, how about you send money to market makers, buy the XRP from them, and then use it to facilitate payments? They're like, no, we can't do that either. Okay, how about you use your existing Nostro and Vostro infrastructure, but we just make it faster and better? Okay, that sounds good. So that, it took them like 3 iterations. Now, the first solution, that's the optimal solution. That's the best one. It's the cheapest, but the banks weren't ready for that level of complexity, that level of transformation, of change, of disruption. And as we kind of go through this, I think you'll see more and more examples of that.
And then Ripple came to us and said, hey, what about like listing XRP? We have this idea that we basically want to use the XRP asset as sort of like a peg currency. And we believe that there are these big problems that money transmitters have and that, you know, correspondent banking have. And we want to build a solution that utilizes the XRP, the Ripple ledger and XRP to solve some of these issues. This is May 2017.
So May of 2017, they are talking to Bitso about a XRP backed stable coin, which I found very interesting given this video from David Schwartz, which was published October of 2019, almost 2.5 years later. And this was the first time really the XRP community had heard this idea. He talks about various ways you can back the stable coin with XRP and various hedging instruments and so forth.
It's a collateralized stable coin. That means tokenized assets whose...
But yet they had been floating this idea around probably for over 3 years at this point. So once again, you know, this may end up being one of the solutions that RippleNet uses to settle these transactions all around the world. But again, cart before the horse.
As an exchange, your prior questions. So we're like, okay, let's add this new asset, let's add XRP. And we actually were met with a lot of demand. We didn't advertise it, we didn't send a single email. And basically the launch of the XRP market on our exchange basically like brought down, it was the first time that Bitso was brought down by demand. To your prior point, starting to figure out what were the things that we needed to fix.
Well, that was right around the time. That was right around the time that XRP in particular was going vertical.
Exactly.
Like
so
40x growth or something crazy like that during May of 2017.
And the way that sort of Ripple pitched this to us was, look, we have this very ambitious plan to build something called, at that point it was called XRapid, now it's called ODL, which was to move money cross-border utilizing XRP. And we're going to use exchanges on different jurisdictions to basically be the place in which the fiat currencies get turned into crypto or XRP, or the XRP gets turned into a fiat currency. And we were, to be very honest, we were a little bit skeptical at the time. We're like, well, that sounds great, but like, you know, XRP doesn't have any liquidity around the world. You know, XRP, you know, like we've tried to do this with Bitcoin. It's been very, very difficult to get money transmitters on board, etc.
You know, when someone comes onto Twitter and tells me, well, my crypto does 5,000 transactions per second, or it has half a second transaction times, my question to them is always, okay, who's building global liquidity in markets all around the world? Because without that, you really don't have much. You have a great feature that's not going to get used. You have a product that's going to fall into the chasm. This is what sets Ripple apart right there. He just said it. It's really hard to get market makers into the market, even with Bitcoin, the most liquid active cryptocurrency at the time, and they couldn't get market makers in there, but yet Ripple has done exactly that.
And then in 2018, about a year after we listed XRP on the ledger on Bitso, Ripple came to us and said, hey, we really are building this thing. And we would like for Bitso to be one of the partners to launch this. And they basically presented with a very interesting plan, or what we thought was a very interesting plan that, where a lot of the questions and a lot of the comments that we made priorly and a lot of our concerns were sort of addressed. And we took a chance on it, right? Like, because it required us to build some stuff. It was stuff that made our exchange stronger. So basically they wanted better APIs. And so we also took it as an opportunity to make our APIs more robust and add more functionality that we thought could be beneficial for other customers.
So that's about the time their preferred liquidity providers were announced, which was Bitso, CoinsPH, and I forget the last one. But they are literally flying by the seat of their pants. Wait till you hear how far developed the product was.
In December of 2018, we started doing the first, again, back then, XRapid, now ODL transactions. and it was very primitive, right? Like I sort of felt a little bit like when I was playing with Bitcoin the first time, and it was like on a terminal, and it's like not a night. There was no UI, whatnot. So we're making these payments, and the flow of the payment is the following. So you fund an exchange, let's say in Europe, and let's say you have euros at an exchange in Europe that has an XRP euro market. And then basically, Ripple's built software that can read the order book in the European exchange, can read the order book at Bitso, let's say, and it basically gives you an exchange rate. And it tells you, look, if you buy XRP in this moment and send it to Bitso and then convert it back to pesos, you're going to get an FX between euros and pesos of a certain amount. So we did a few transactions moving part of our own treasury money that we kept at this other exchange. And it was kind of cool, but it was kind of like difficult. We gave Ripple a little bit of feedback. We said, our engineering teams are not the one moving the money. It's our finance team, our treasury team. So like, in order for them to use it, you need to build UIs. And then they went and built these UIs. And then we were a customer of the UIs ourselves. And we continue to actually be customers.
So if I'm hearing this right, in late 2018, early 2019, RippleNet, XRapid, was a command line interface, which granted, that's the first thing you build. And down the road, that's probably what everybody's going to use because it's just going to be this automated backend process that everybody trusts. But in the beginning, you have to have that API that people can touch and feel and, okay, now what is this and what's happened, so they can see it and experience it and kind of build some trust that, okay, this is what this is doing. I understand this. Let's go forward with it.
And at some point, basically, we started talking to very large money transmitters.
Very large money transmitters with an S, plural. We know one of those is MoneyGram, and based on everything else that was going on around the same time, the other one was Western Union. One of those jumped at the chance. The other one took a pass and became the next blockbuster.
So you're on the other side of most of the MoneyGram flow now.
Exactly. So not Bitso specifically, but the customers of Bitso that make up our market, right? Like our exchange. At the end of the day, what we've built is a platform that intermediates buyers and sellers, just like Coinbase Pro, like a Bitstamp. And so we have customers that take the other side of the flow.
So I'm really glad that Ryan asked this question. We know that Ripple made an investment in Bitso. It was outlined in their Q4 markets report that I did a video on. I mistakenly assumed that maybe that was for Bitso to become a market maker and that perhaps they were on the other side of these transactions, buying the XRP and moving it somewhere else to where they could make a spread on it. But that is not the case. And we're actually going to find out what that money is for and what it's about.
So like between May, or in the 2 years, I guess, between May 2017 and July 2019, where we started to see more traction on this ODL stuff, the liquidity of XRP at Bitso has significantly increased.
So there we have some more insight into the early days of RippleNet. I think what they did is turn the payment processors loose. Those guys have, like low value, low volume payments going across RippleNet to different parts of the world. Not enough to really cause a problem, a liquidity problem, but enough to kind of build a baseline and test out the platform and ensure that it's working and give them some bugs and things to sort out from the system. But really, they needed something else to get the ball rolling, and that's MoneyGram.
Like liquidity is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. Like nobody wants to market make if there's no volume, and nobody wants to send transactions if there's no liquidity.
That's why MoneyGram is so key to bootstrapping this network, as I describe it. They could send a steady flow of daily volume to create that baseline of liquidity that's large enough to start attracting the market makers to come in and participate in the market. And in fact, Ripple has created an incentive program for MoneyGram to do exactly that. They get paid for providing daily base levels of liquidity in key marketplaces until they can get enough momentum for the thing to get going on its own.
But Ripple's done a really good job at sort of like rolling this out slowly and steadily. And we've been building this sort of market, at least on our side, very organically and adding liquidity to XRP on our platform. And we're starting to see really interesting flows. The stretch goal that I have set for the company is that we get to 20% of the weekly remittances by the end of 2020.
So the US dollar Mexican peso corridor is about 35 billion. It's about 2.5-3 billion per month. So 20% of that is about 15 to 20 million per day. So that's what they're hoping to get to by the end of 2020. Right now they're at I think 1.5 million per day, and that's growing very, very rapidly. So I think there's a very good chance that they will not only meet that but overshoot it, because we also have the network effects starting to take hold, and I think this thing's going to grow very, very rapidly this year.
As you continue to scale these things, you find more and more things that break, which is also sort of exciting for us. Like the product and the platform is getting better through the growth of this product, because we're handling new types of transactions in an ongoing basis.
Does that eclipse the exchange business then by the end of the year if you hit those numbers? It's got to.
Well, this is where I'll turn around the question to you. What's going to happen with the halving in the next few months? What's your expectation?
We're not going to speculate on price, but to your point, you can pull levers on the remittance side. So if you are able to get to that scale, it seems like it would have to become the majority of the business until whatever the next kind of boom cycle is.
So I can tell you already that since we launched the exchange, except for very, very few, very specific days, Bitcoin Mexican pesos had always been our largest trading pair, and that has flipped for us now. Our XRP MXN book is consistently trading higher than our Bitcoin MXN. I believe that's been already the case for at least the last 8 weeks.
This has got to be one of the bigger success stories for Ripple in terms of integrations, is it not? Because I generally think that the criticism of Ripple the company, and I've not been shy about mine, has been the delta between what they market and what they deliver, right? Particularly when it comes to XRP flows. What's interesting about Bitso is that you are a crypto exchange. So there's no dancing around the subject. Having a meaningful XRP stake and actually using that asset is much more intuitive than, say, having XRP incorporated into MoneyGram, which really took a pretty large capital infusion from Ripple to directly into MoneyGram to pull off.
What's that, Ryan? You mean those dirty, unwashed masses of XRP speculators were right? The reason they were buying XRP is for the utility, and it's turning out to be exactly 100% true? You don't say. And then, he goes on and like misstates the situation again. And he talks about, well, it took a significant investment from Ripple and MoneyGram for them to get using that. No, that is not true. MoneyGram was in dire financial straits. They had lost a huge portion of their business. They have $1 billion in debt on the books. And, the market was, because of Venmo and some of the other competitors, all of them were down in the US. And they were also in the middle of this digital transformation, redoing their website. They had all these internal projects. I guarantee you some of that $50 million, the lion's share of it, went to funding some of those other projects. And they did not need $50 million to get RippleNet integrated into their existing system. It was a partnership. It was an investment. It helped MoneyGram. It helped Ripple. MoneyGram gets to modernize their system and have this new functionality that's going to save them money down the road once they can get it up to scale. And Ripple gets that daily base level of liquidity that's needed to draw in the market makers and get the whole system bootstrapped and off the ground.
Not all the customers that we've been onboarding are money transmitters, like MoneyGram, right? So there's other types of businesses that have a necessity to move money abroad and cross-border and want to do it quickly and at a good rate that are becoming interested in this solution. Not all the flows that we're seeing are only US to Mexico. Like we're starting to see things from other parts of like other jurisdictions. I can tell you for sure that, you know, the biggest flow and the biggest type of customer up to now is definitely the US to Mexico, and it is definitely money transmitters like MoneyGram. We've had a cross-border team at Bitso since 2016. And like well before we started exploring this possibility with Ripple, where we have a product that allows you to do something similar with Bitcoin. The product that we've built in conjunction with Ripple is a lot better than anything we had built before. It has, it's more intuitive, it has a nicer UI, it understands the customer pain points better. You know, the fact that XRP settles very quickly and that Bitcoin takes a long time to settle, when what you're looking to do is reduce sort of like volatility exposure, is a big pro of utilizing XRP over utilizing Bitcoin for these sort of transactions.
So he said two things there that are both very, very important. Number one, they're going to use the asset that is the best suited for the task. And right now that's Ripple and XRP, because it has the high TPS, it has stable fees, very low fees, and it, you know, the transactions complete in a few seconds. You don't get that with the other top cryptocurrencies. And the other part of that is, you know, they had a Bitcoin solution, but it wasn't as good. It didn't have all the features. It wasn't integrated into these other systems. And that's the key. That's what Ripple is doing that sets them apart from everybody else out there. And even that's not enough. They then have to take that platform that's very capable and functional and kickstart it and bootstrap it and get the liquidity flowing to attract the bigger players and allow them to ramp it up and up and up and up. And that's the phase that we're in right now.
Why XRP though? So this is the question that I kind of always came back to, because the ledger can do 90% of what I think is advertised and what you've already built in conjunction with them. And now you've got the introduction of stablecoins, some of which you support, right? You've got True USD on the platform, at least. Maybe there are others that I missed, but I know that at least True USD is there. So I'm curious, in a universe where stablecoins become the norm, right? Dollar pegged, basket pegged, whatever they're pegged to, where liquidity for those assets increases, and you can still leverage the same kind of base protocols, but now the bridge currencies, which has always been Ripple's pitch, now the bridge currencies can just be a stablecoin where you're not worried about the fluctuations. Why is that wrong, right? Like why must it be XRP, or why is that kind of going to be the near medium term and kind of foreseeable future mechanism and currency leverage in this particular transaction versus something that doesn't have the volatility?
The way that I sort of like to frame this is that for me, and I think for most of us, technology is sort of this ever evolving thing, right? And when you look at the liquidity of something like True USD and Mexican pesos at Bitso versus the liquidity of XRP and Mexican pesos, like there's no comparison, right? Like we have significantly more depth in our XRP markets than we do in our True USD markets. I simply could not support the amount of volume that we're seeing in our True USD books. We're not the other side of the trade. Our customers are the other side of the trade for these transactions. I do think that this needs to be looked at and constantly reevaluated, right? Because when you're going through whatever, whether it's XRP, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Ether, whatever you want, you have sort of like an extra conversion that perhaps you don't need, right? And you're taking perhaps extra risk that perhaps you don't need. What I can tell you is that without a doubt, I would not be able to do these transactions. Like Bitso would not be able to do these transactions right now on any of our other in any of our other ledgers. Like even if we wanted to use True USD, the settlement of Ether is slower than the settlement of XRP. And if we wanted to use and we're not supporting an asset on top of XRP or on top of the Ripple ledger, but even if we wanted to, we would need to build up liquidity.
It's all about the liquidity and the settlement of the underlying asset. You have to create that liquidity. You have to build it over time and create that ecosystem. It doesn't just spring up on its own. But let's say we are in that world where we have CBDCs or stable coins of some sort, and that liquidity has been created over time slowly. Well, it still doesn't solve the complexity problem, and that's the part of this equation that these people are missing. What happens when one small country needs to send money to another small country in a different part of the world? Is enough liquidity going to exist between those trading pairs? Probably not. That's where XRP, a global bridge asset, steps in and solves that problem beautifully.
Specifically for the case of cross-border, I think where we are today are the very beginnings of something incredibly exciting. But I think it would be foolish to think that this is going to be the end state. I think this needs to continue to evolve. And I think stablecoins today, provide an alternative thing that, perhaps didn't exist at the extent that we would have liked them to exist when we started to build this product, right? Like the only real stablecoin back then was Tether, and Tether is something that is difficult is a difficult on-ramp, had its own sort of set of, I don't know what you want to call them, conspiracy theories, whatnot.
Oh, you mean like the Tether's not 100% backed and is a time bomb waiting to explode? Well, there's that. Now, there's another piece of the liquidity puzzle that these guys are completely missing. So my longtime viewers, when I say ILP and all of the investments that Ripple has made into that ecosystem that are coming down the road, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Think about the tremendous amount of liquidity that is going to create globally. And I think it is going to push XRP so far out, so far ahead of everything else out there, stablecoins included, that it is really not going to be much of a contest.
The largest component is actually not tech. Like the largest component is convincing these highly regulated entities to do something with you, to open an account with you, to get comfortable with utilizing crypto. Like those problems are a lot harder to fix, right? And stable coins present a challenge there because, we started to have these new stable coins where the aim is to make them incredibly transparent, where there's a lot of auditing going on, where there's a lot of quote unquote good people running these projects. But for a long time, it was a very opaque thing, right? And sometimes for these players, it's incredibly difficult to assess the risk of having a large operation that depends on assets where they don't fully understand how they're managed and what potential risks could there be behind them.
And that is something that we have talked about a lot on this channel. The banks are not going to just jump into bed with Johnny come lately. They have been working with Ripple, most of them for 4 or 5 years at this point. And by the time they get comfortable with these stable coins and some of these projects that are out there, think about how far down the road Ripple is going to be. It is literally a marathon like they talk about. Ripple's probably in mile 3 or 4 or 5 at this point. And who's even crossed the start line?
So Ripple is an investor, correct? In
yes.
So was that through this particular initiative or just in the company itself?
We were building this partnership well before looking at an investment. And then Bitso started to think a little bit about investment. And we were speaking to the Ripple team. One of the things that we heard from the Ripple team is hey, we really love the way that you've run your operation. We really like the focus that you've had on sort of like regulatory clarity and building operational excellency. And we're just curious, like, are you thinking about expanding internationally? And we said, yeah, we have plans to expand internationally. We want to go into LATAM. We see a big opportunity in LATAM. And they became very excited about that idea. And they said, is there anything we can do to help accelerate that? And then we said, look, if we want to accelerate that, we would need to raise a round. And they became very, very interested in being part of that.
So there you go. That was what Ripple's investment in Bitso was all about, helping them expand to cover a greater part of the Latin American region. And that's really their goal, as I've seen it, is they want a handful, maybe 10 or less exchanges that each have a significant portion of the world. We know for Asia, that's going to be SBI. We know for Latin America, that's going to be Bitso. In the Philippines, it's CoinsPH, and, Coinbase is likely to play a role in there as well. I'm not sure exactly who's going to cover what at this point, but that's kind of the strategy, is they're expecting more consolidation in the marketplace as these exchanges kind of swallow each other up. And they want to partner with the biggest and best in each of these regions of the world to where they can build deep liquidity, deep order books, and start pushing high volume, high value payments through.
As part of the relationship with Ripple, them providing cheaper access to the bridge currency?
No, the answer is absolutely not. We did not receive XRP, and the XRP, and we don't require to have XRP as working capital for this product to be to continue to grow. And no, we did not receive access to cheaper XRP as part of this deal.
Boom! More FUD bites the dust. Bye-bye.
I think people completely underestimate the amount of utility that customers in LATAM are actually utilizing for crypto. Like, you and I are part of a few Telegram groups where folks talk frequently about the narrative. Like, there's a narrative on some of these chats. And I'm just amazed how, like, 99% of those chats are dominated always by price action. Like, that is the interesting thing. It's speculation.
It never fails. Every time someone comes out to attack Ripple, they start with FUD, that gets defeated, and then it comes down to, well, price. XRP's declined and my asset's done better for price. And I'm like, okay, great. You chase price, I'll chase utility, real world use case, and we'll see who wins in the long run. This guy knows it. He's making money off of real world utility today. He's seeing it growing. They're talking about this is just the beginning and this is amazing.
And whenever you see sort of these like little things of like, oh, wow, like this technology is actually useful for someone or changing someone's life, whatever, like there's very little interest. And I think the way in which crypto really becomes relevant for the world is through use cases, right? Whether it's because it becomes a store of value or because it becomes a medium of exchange or because it provides a way to audit things more easily, whatever it is. But I think one of the things, we need to look at those use cases and make sure that the technology becomes useful for folks.
You know, it's hard to put it much better than that. At the end of the day, it's real world use cases and utility that's going to win the day. I want to thank Ryan for putting this interview together. It was excellent. It covered so many things, filled in a lot of gaps for me, lots of wonderful nuggets that I think went right over most people's heads. That's why I wanted to put this video together and give some of the context and the background. You know, there's some people like Tone Vase and Lazy Chico that are just going to go down with the ship. And of course, they're in Bitcoin and Chainlink, so they'll probably do all right. But the point is, they are closed-minded to this reality. I mean, we have someone running the largest exchange in Mexico saying, look, speculative trading is not enough in a down market to keep the lights on. We've got to find something else. And here, XRP has flipped Bitcoin for the last 6 weeks. And it is driving tremendous liquidity, tremendous demand. And it's giving them a lot of hope and getting them very excited about the possibilities for the future. And so, I thought Ryan was maybe in that camp from his earlier video, but it seems he's at least open-minded enough to look at what's happening and kind of see some of the writing on the wall. He may not be the biggest fan still, and that's okay, but I think he gave it a fair shake here, and that's something that I can certainly appreciate. Okay, that's what I got. I want to thank my patrons for supporting me. Makes videos like this possible. This was 3 solid days of editing and recording and so forth. If you want to join them, want to support my work, patreon.com/tothelifeboats. I'm actually doing monthly live streams that are Patreon only, so that those just a smaller crowd, so we can get together and chat about whatever they want to talk about. So there you go, patreon.com/tothelifeboats. I'm Sam I Am. We'll catch y'all next video.